The case against Richard Allen, it's again more twists, more turns. It's never a boring day as we discuss if he is in fact the Delphi murderer after 60 plus confessions and 22 months in custody. Does that reveal the truth? Is that going to sink his ship? Joining me to discuss, Bob Motta, defense attorney, host of the podcast Defense Diaries. Go download that wherever you get podcasts, also on YouTube. Bob, you were there at, we talked about day one and day two last week. Day three, you were there as well. And, now a little bit out. What was your takeaways on day three and overall of how all these hearings went?
Day three was essentially the state's motion in limine to exclude the third party culprit defense from them being able to bring it in.
Hmm.
And it was, even though it was the state's motion, it was really the defense that had to put on the case because they had to convince the judge that there's a nexus between any of these individuals that they've named as third party culprits and to the crime.
Hmm.
So, meaning that, and we could argue all day, does the Elvis Fields thing, putting himself there, how is that any different than Richard Allen putting himself
Yeah.
there? I mean, it's like, I think that there's some type of nexus, but ultimately, they put on a ton of witnesses. They put on their own expert who was a gal who was pretty learned. I've heard people trashing her over the interwebs, and I'm like, well, she's got an education level. She trains the feds. She typically uh, testifies on behalf of the prosecution. So it seems disingenuous for people to be trashing her. I mean, and it's because her opinion that she thought that the crime scene looked like a textbook ritualistic killing.
Hmm.
So like, and that was her opinion, and they couldn't sway her on it. So she testified, and they then put on two of the cops, Kevin Murphy and Todd Click, who were two of the cops who continued to investigate. Um, you know, but the state was pretty effective in terms of their cross examination. They said, look, with all these guys, no matter all these different little things that you found that seemed to indicate they might have been involved, you can't place any of those guys at the bridge, can you? No, you have no, you can't provide any kind of evidence that they had any connection with Delphi, can you? No. Like, so they had to answer those questions truthfully. The problem from the defense side of it is that they're limited in terms of their investigation. They're not going to be able to go and subpoena these guys' phones and do all the things that they need to do in order to try to prove that they were there. And now we're 7 years out.
Hmm.
So it's like you're trying to investigate from the defense side of it, but you don't have the resources and the capabilities that you have if you're law enforcement to investigate these types of things.
Hmm.
So, like, ultimately, it gets down to me, the absolutely biggest piece of evidence that really kind of came out, which again, much like Karen Reed, has me thinking they should not lean as much into that third party culprit theory and lean into this phone data that I thought was bombshell.
Hmm.
And that is that Libby's phone all of a sudden at 4:33 a.m. pops back on, and a flood of 15 messages that people had been sending much earlier come onto the phone.
Hmm.
And this is the phone that's found under her shoe or in a shoe underneath her body.
Hmm.
And to me, it's a game changer. I
Yeah.
mean, somehow that phone went on. If I'm the defense, I am spending every dime I have to get the best forensic phone people on the planet in there to testify that there's only one way that happened, that somebody turned the phone back on at 4:33 a.m. It blows apart the state's timeline, because
Can
their
that be?
timeline definitively
Yeah.
is that the girls were killed between 2:30 and 3:30. Period. That's it.
Yeah.
That they've painted themselves in that corner. And if you've got a situation where this phone is turning on inexplicably after no data coming in or out
Hmm.
after like 5:47 p.m.,
Yeah.
there's nothing. It's radio silent. And then all of a sudden at 4:33, where theoretically nobody's moving, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're talking two deceased girls, and all of a sudden this phone just pops on and all these messages, like, that's indisputable. that
It
happened.
is, but can that be proven that the phone was turned off and turned on? I would imagine the log on the phone itself would show, powered off or whatever, however it powered off. If somebody turned it off, if it just ran out of battery, and then all of a sudden it comes back on it for something, is that it
How?
powering on and off? Or is it, I mean, I can say I've had this happen with my phone, especially in this office, where the cell signal sometimes it looks great, and then sometimes it's like not there. I can look like I'm going off the grid too for however long it decides to want to not actually be active. And all of a sudden, oh, the signal seems to pick up. And then boom, a flood of texts come in. That does happen. And it's in the woods, it's under her body. I guess I'd have to, my question would be, how strong is the signal there from their provider? Is that even a reasonable explanation? I mean, it's something to look at, I would think, if you're
Well,
going to
for
go down
sure.
all
I
the
mean, well,
angles.
that's going to certainly be the state's position,
Yeah.
and I think that is their position.
Hmm.
That the thing just like was not able to ping for whatever
Hmm.
reason. But remember, AT&T was pinging
Yeah.
every 15 minutes. The odds of 11 hours going by
True.
and not one of those pings going through, to me, indicates that somebody had turned the phone on and then turned it back
I would
on, or
imagine,
just not.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'd imagine there's a log on the phone that would be able to say how the phone went off if it lost signal. And that would show, I think, the answer to those questions. I don't think that's a question that's impossible for us to get the answer to.
Exactly, and that's why I'm saying, man, forget spending money on experts trying to prove something that you're never going to be able to prove,
Hmm.
which is that these five dudes are the guys who did it, because they don't. The defense doesn't have to prove that.
Hmm.
To get to the reasonable doubt that you need to get to in this case, the most powerful evidence is the fact that that phone popped back on at 4:30 or 4:30 in the morning. Man, it just is, because it
Yeah.
blows apart their timeline. If you can destroy their timeline, Richard Allen certainly wasn't driving back there at 4:33 in the morning with two dead girls and
Hmm.
staging them by himself.
Yeah.
Like, it seems implausible. Like, I don't know what time he wakes up, but I'm assuming that he'd be alibied for that time.
Yeah.
So, and like, I'm certain that his wife is going to be able to say, well, he can't, he was home all night with me, and maybe somebody else. I don't know what he did that evening. you,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, all those questions, but I'm assuming that they'd be able to establish that it wasn't Alan,
Hmm.
because he's at the bridge until the time that they say he's at the bridge, and then he's gone. But if the girls are killed sometime that night, because the two things that also come out is there is no time of death that was established,
Hmm.
and they didn't take a temperature reading of the bodies.
Hmm.
Like, those are huge gaping holes for the state in terms
Very
of trying to
much.
prove these girls were killed. So, it was, I was less impressed with the third party culprit stuff, because a lot of it is the exact same stuff that we've already heard. But as far as that phone data, man, like, that is where I am. That is
Yeah.
where I am spending all my resources if I'm the defense on that case.
As of now, has Judge Gull made a ruling on if the third party defense is are going to be admitted, or is it still up for consideration in the ether?
Up for grabs still. We
All
don't know
right.
yet. The only thing she decided, which she did decide on day 3, was to move Allen out of the prison.
Yeah.
So he's going to Cass County Jail. That's where he'll be through trial. So she did rule on that day. And the thing with that is the damage done.
Yeah.
We heard the bombshell information that he's uh, confessed 61 times
Yeah.
in some form or fashion. But it all happens in this 3-month period when he's eating
Yeah.
his own feces.
Yeah, I mean,
Y-
how do you take any of that anyone seriously and anything they're saying if like I did it and then they take a big bite?
Right.
It's like I would not take anything anyone's saying at that moment to be legit. I would take it to be a survival mechanism to get the hell out of that. And I'll say anything you want. I'll say I shot Kennedy if you want me to.
Right.
If it gets me out of this hell that I'm experiencing.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, it's and that thing's coming. That trial's
Yeah.
coming. Like, I don't see any kind of continuances. I think this thing's going. Does that mean that there can't be? If because the one thing that's still kind of hanging out there is that the state's witness, this Cecil, he's a cop who's doing the extraction. He's still working on 7 years in, still working on an extraction of Liberty German's phone. because now there's a new version of Celebrite that he wants to run it through there. And so they're still waiting. They're still
Yeah.
waiting for this report. And like that phone, like to me, this case is all about the phone data,
Yeah.
not just Liberty's phone, but
Yeah.
what about Rick Allen's phone? Like, what is his? I've heard nothing about his
No.
phone. What is
No.
his phone showing? Like,
Yeah, I mean, we've heard so many arguments in the case against Richard Allen here in the Delphi murders of why he, likely didn't do it. Um, and then we hear the arguments of, well, he made all these confessions. Obviously, they don't have to prove motive here on the state's part, but that's what a juror would want to make any sort of sense of this. And if you look at the arc of behavior of Richard Allen, he worked at CVS, he had a family, doesn't have a criminal history or record of anything like this. You don't have any friends or family that have come out going, "Oh yeah, he was a weird guy. He was. I always suspect." Like none of that.
none
So,
of it.
what on earth are you thinking the prosecution is going to be bringing to the table to show that he did do it, other than his prison confessions, um, and that he went for a walk that day and raised his hand and said, "Hey, I was there."
That's, I mean, their three big pieces are presence, mere presence, where he put himself there. Like he volunteered
Voluntarily.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have the unspent casing, which is going to come in,
Yeah.
and that they claim that they matched to his gun, which it, I'm here to tell you that it's junk science. That being said,
Hmm.
when you're talking about human beings that are sitting on a jury, it can still be very powerful evidence.
Yeah.
Because like jurors going to be like, all right, well, they got a guy that's saying it's BS, and they're getting a guy on there that's saying that it's gospel.
Hmm.
Who do I believe in terms of
Yeah.
experts?
Yeah.
So, like all that's going to be resonating through their mind is that they've got one person saying that they found it at the scene, and then it matches his gun.
Hmm.
I mean, it's powerful, scary evidence. If you're the defense, whether it's junk science or not,
Yeah.
it's coming in.
And that's
Like
where the,
that's
the
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 fact.
the character of the expert witnesses is going to make a big deal. You have to have someone who's compelling, someone that is approachable and feels safe and not
Yeah.
standoffish and not, here's the fact, motherfucker.
Right.
It's
Right.
because if you have one or the other, I think that the character of each is going to weigh heavily on that jury because of the two facts.
100%,
Yeah.
100%. And again, if I'm the defense, I'm looking for an expert that's going to get, 10 different of the exact same model weapons,
Hmm.
and they're going to, like just
Spend a
uh
casing
yeah,
or unspent
steal a
casing. Yeah.
casing
Yeah.
out of it,
Yep.
and then you're going to use all 10 of those guns like blind,
Yep.
and then you're going to have that expert try to match that
Yeah.
cycled casing to each one of the 10. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it's like if you can do it, you can do it.
Yeah.
Then, the problem from the defense is if you got an expert who does that, you're saying, well, don't write that report because that report's going to kill us.
Sure.
So but if they come through and they're like, we tried,
Hmm.
there's no way you can do it. It's not actual science.
Hmm.
Then you go with it. But again, man, it's like, and then you got the confessions. So those are the three big things. I mean, if you pull these confessions out, you're left with four individuals who identified somebody on the bridge and all gave vastly different descriptions.
Hmm.
You've got him being there from anywhere from 12:30 to 3:30. There's two different time frames that exist. And like that's going to be their problem, is that their entire case is that he's bridge guy and
Hmm.
that he's the one who told them to go down the hill. So that is because it's going to be similar because they added straight murder to it, where it was always they were doing like a felony murder case where they just had to prove that he committed the felony, meaning the kidnapping that resulted in the girls dying, and then they get the guilty on the felony murder.
Yeah.
But they've added kind of like in Karen Reed, where that he's the one who did the murder as well, which
Hmm.
is a much, much more difficult case for them to prove. So, I mean, they're just relying on this that he's bridge guy. He has to be bridge guy. Who else was there?
Hmm.
Even though we've got this geofence data, which the state on day 3 is sitting there poo-pooing. I'm like, man, boy, they better never try to use geofence data to get a warrant again, because
Yeah.
every defense attorney in that county is going to be like, oh, well, Nick McClelland said this is junk. It's completely unreliable,
Mm-hmm.
and because from what I've heard from geofence data is it's way more reliable than tower data,
Mm-hmm.
because they set up these little fences. Because like, what geofencing really came from is like Google developed it. Like if you're walking in New
For
York, like
advertising.
on
Yep.
your trip,
Yep.
and you're like, yeah, and you're like, and they know that you've bought a certain product at some point, and you're like, oh, well, I'm walking by this store. It's going to pop up on your phone if that company has paid
Yeah.
for
And it
advertising.
works
Pop up when you
wonderfully.
enter that zone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I
yeah,
was just in New York, and everywhere I went, it was like, go on Facebook or whatever, the ads that are popping up. Oh, look, that's right across the street. It's not a coincidence that it's doing that.
exactly. Like, so, and that's what I'm saying, man. Like, you've got to just dump all your cash into the forensic, the phone
Yeah.
guys. Like, because to me, that's the key to the case.
Yeah.
If you're the defense, because like they're going to have major issues proving time of death.
Yeah.
That's the fact. Like they're not going to be able to do it. Their autopsy isn't going to show it, and they just didn't do the things that they had to do. And we heard coming in that there were a lot of issues with this case in terms of the forensics that were done or not done,
Mm-hmm.
and those are all going to rear their ugly heads.
Yeah.
Like, and so that again, if I'm the defense in this case, I'm much like in Karen Reed. I'm thinking long and hard about how much I want to be able to point the finger at somebody else. I mean, look, is a defense attorney perfect world? You always want to be able to say, my guy didn't do it. He did it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's
Sure.
what you want to be able to do, but they're not going to be able to establish the type of evidence that's
Yeah.
going to convince a jury that, oh yeah, that guy's the guy that did it. And when you come forward with that third party culprit thing and you're saying that these are the guys who did it, they don't have to prove anything, but it comes across to a jury as that they do.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like that, it's like that gets lost in the jury's minds. It's like, okay, well, we've got two different sides saying that this guy did it over here, or this group of guys did it over here. Like where are we at?
Mm-hmm.
And like, and if you start comparing the two, as opposed to just looking at the forensic evidence to see what it does not prove in terms of Richard Allen being the killer, I think that you're really entering dangerous territory. So I would.
Oh, you're back.
Oh, did I freeze up?
You did for a second there. I think it was my internet. It said it died for a moment. Pick up from where you said it gets to be dangerous territory.
Yeah, it gets. If you go that third party culprit route, you are entering very, very dangerous territory, because at the end of the day, you're asking the jury essentially to pick between one of the two
Mm.
narratives, as opposed to focusing on the actual evidence
Yeah.
that does prove something. Like
Sure.
if they could put an expert on that says that the phone turns on inexplicably, that there's only two possible scenarios. One, that it was outside of the cell tower
Mm-hmm.
to where it wasn't receiving pings, gone from that area, or that it was turned on at 4:33. That those are the only two. That it can't be that theory that we were talking
Yeah.
about, that just for whatever reason the phone wasn't picking up that tower for 11 hours. If you get an expert to say that's not how this thing works,
Yeah.
like the AT&T was pinging it. So like, to me, that's what I'm leaning into, because then you avoid any of the pratfalls with
Yeah.
the third party culprit thing.
And digital footprint is a big thing in the case here against Richard Allen. And we're talking about the geofencing. We can talk about the pinging, but also what about just the content of the phone, of his phone, of his computers, of anything? I mean, things like that. I imagine they have looked at. I mean, in I don't know, 99% of the cases that we talk about, there's just a plethora of free flow of what's going through the killer's mind. And I would imagine, if just this is such an out of character thing for him to go from being the CVS guy that people know and are good with, to all of a sudden one day he decides to go murder these girls and do a odinistic ritual in the woods. Maybe some Googling has gone on to determine how to do this, or showing an interest or a penchant for it. It's not just a, hey, I think I'm going to go do an Odinistic ritual and kill these two girls as I'm out for a lovely walk today. Eh,
After leaving his mom's house.
After leaving his
Like, I
mom.
mean,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what right, like, that's their story that he decides to leave his mom's house, says, "You know what? I'm gonna go over to the bridge and I'm gonna find a couple of victims because
Yeah.
I'm in the mood to murder after, I'm a 48-year-old man, show known indications of doing anything like this. There's because look, the what we know is that the defense at least has alleged that nothing on his phone connects him to the girls,
Mhm.
connects him to Odinism, that nothing on any of his devices does either of those things either.
Yeah.
So we know that. I mean, they've stated that in their pleadings that there is absolutely no evidence that Richard Allen knew any of these dudes, that Googled any kind of Odin type stuff,
Yeah.
had any connection to these guys, or had any connection to the girls whatsoever. So, I mean, that's compelling. Like their biggest challenge is going to be getting over the the confessions, like
Sure.
because people have a tendency to think that mental illness is bullshit, which is crazy to me, but there's plenty of people out there
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
just don't buy it. And those are the same folks that you're going to have to try to convince that he's admitting to something that he didn't do,
Yeah.
because that's the normal response from, again, normal human beings are like, I would never confess to something that I didn't do ever. I don't care what they're doing. They could torture me all like for 10 days and I'd never confess to. Sure you wouldn't.
Until you've been tortured for
Yeah,
months on
right.
end,
Yeah.
which is essentially what was going on, which is insane to me to begin with. That this is like, yeah, that's what they did. It's okay. Oop de doo, Bob. Business is normal. Like, what the fuck? Like, there's no
I know.
accountability for this.
I know. I know.
It's like I mean, especially, I mean, there's a lot on the line here too with Delphi, because if he is found innocent of all of these crimes, his treatment in jail, in prison, in all the decisions that were made out of that county, that's going to turn into a very large lawsuit against everything. I mean, look what happened. I mean, if you go back to the case in Wisconsin, the making a murderer. I can't think of
Stephen
his.
Avery.
What's that?
Stephen Avery.
Stephen Avery. Yes, I should know that. I'm from there. He was charged earlier on with another crime. Ended up suing the city of Manitowoc for millions of dollars. Right before they're supposed to pay, he's suddenly found guilty of another murder. Oops, we don't have to pay anymore. Which,
Yeah.
again, seeing the track record of Delphi, wouldn't be surprising to see if that's how this plays out over the next couple of years. Not to say
Yeah.
that we haven't seen this before, but there's a lot riding on this. Because if they're wrong, they're really wrong, and they're going to pay a heavy price for it. All the more reason to make this look that like he did it. But again, there's so many hurdles to get over to do that.
For real. Yeah. It's going to be, and the one thing that was evident, it's going to be a hard fought trial.
Yeah.
It's like that was the first time I've been waiting for 2 years to see some actual litigation in this case.
Yeah.
Because the only thing that we had really seen was like a safekeeping hearing like last June.
Hmm.
So in terms of actual litigation on actual motions, this is the first that I've seen any of the lawyers perform, and they were all up to the task.
Yeah.
It's going to be a hard fought trial. McClellan was chomping at the bit. He was ready for his cross examinations, and he comes hard.
Yeah.
He comes hard at their witnesses. He's not shy about being aggressive on cross. So, I fully anticipate this is going to be a very, very hard fought case. Probably with a lot of sniping back and forth during the course of that trial. Like, and as critical as I've been of Gull, I give her plaudits for her allowing them, both sides, to just litigate this shit for 3 days.
Hmm.
Like, we went to 6:30 night or day two, and then we went to 8:30
Hmm.
on day three. So she let them go,
Yeah.
and she let them get their stuff in. I mean, she kind of created that monster by not not getting these things
Yeah.
scheduled more timely, but at the point where she's handling it, I thought she did a great job in terms of like letting that get litigated.
Yeah.
And we'll see how she comes down. I don't anticipate that she's going to grant any of their motions. I certainly don't think she's tossing the confessions out. But and I do think that in a limited circumstance, she's going to allow some of the third party stuff to come in, which for the defense could be a blessing,
Yeah.
like which would force them not to lean into that. Because I get the sense that like Rosie is more of the mindset, let's go forensics, let's destroy the timeline aspect. And I think that Baldwin is more like, I want to go after this third party thing. I think these are the guys.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you've got this because these guys aren't partners in
Hmm.
their private practices. So in every individual attorney is going to have their own concept
Sure.
on how to try a case. So it's interesting to see, they've got to play nice together and try to make a cohesive
Hmm.
decision in terms of how they're going to proceed with the defense on it. But again, to me, the strongest evidence is that forensic stuff, and
Yeah.
that's what you lead into it.
Yeah. Without a doubt. Hey, thanks for checking out the video. Be sure to follow us wherever you download podcasts, and especially Apple Podcasts, where you can get advanced episode and premium content on our premium channel right there. Also, be sure to follow us on social media so you don't miss any breaking updates on the stories that matter to you most. We're on TikTok, X, Instagram, Facebook. Just search Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Brueski, and you'll find us right there. Again, thanks for watching.